Hello, world! Again, not going over that today, but maybe someday in the future. Today is about data and some networking simplified. We're going to stick around a 100,000 foot view here. We're going to try to stay out of the weeds as much as possible just to give you an idea of some information about data and networking. So, like, what is data? How does it go from place A to place B? What's a socket? Protocols? What are they? Why do I care? And some standards in data transmission. So we're going to cover these topics as we go through, and let me know if we missed something, and we'll revisit this video again in the future. Data. So what is data? You're looking at it. Data's on the screen. Data is your name. Data is anything that's out there. A dictionary has data in it. If you want to know what a word is, you know to look up in a dictionary that word, and then you can look up the definition behind it. That's data. So it's some information that was stored somewhere. It could be a file and not a file on a computer. It could also be a file on a computer, but not just that. It could be a literal file in a filing cabinet written on paper. It could be in database. It might be in your RAM memory on your computer. It might be in your head memory. Could be maybe you saved it off to a thumb drive. How does this data get to places? Well, you could have a pigeon, yes, real life bird, attach it to its foot, the pigeon flies off, sends your message along. The grapevine. You ever told somebody a story, some information about something, and then that person tells the next person, and then that person tells two more people, and then it keeps growing and growing and growing. So it's a whole entire network of people where you can get information passed about. Maybe one of those old town settings like Andy Griffith. For those of you who don't know, you can probably watch that on Hulu. There's the internet, which now everybody more familiar with these days, where you can post something on web pages. You could send a mail, which we're going to get to and through here. Speaking of the mail, through the post office with mail carriers. And that, just by chance, is where we're going to go with today's information of what we're looking at with data and networking. So, with data, you're going to need formats. So, you're going to want data that is structured, even in a database. There's different ways you could structure data. There's rules that people have put out there. There's domain-driven designs. Maybe you're writing a letter on a piece of paper, and that's where your data is saved in the letter. Maybe you want to save it to the database, and you want to break it down a letter into its components, or saving it down to a file system, and you want to read it in with a program. You're going to need to know how that data is structured so you can save it out and read it back in the same way. Same when sharing it with somebody. If they know how something's written and sent, then they can open your letter, read it, and know where everything is and understand the context of it. The structure, not the letter itself, but at least how it's structured. Some of this data could be saved in a predefined structure that you hold with somebody. So you want to send a mail out to somebody and you want to send a persuasive or a business structured letter. You'd want here, we have a date, a greeting, a little bit of an introduction, reasons. Maybe instead somebody comes along and says, yeah, I see introduction, reasons, and conclusions, but maybe we're just going to save that one piece of data. We'll take those three ideas and save it into the body. So you've got your header, you've got a footer or closing, and then you have your body of your message. Kind of sounds a little bit like HTML. So when you're dealing with data, it's usually helpful to know, as I save data out, this is how it needs to be read in. And then you have a common format to share among people. So everybody that has written business letters or letters like this who have learned the structures of them would write them all the same way when you're sending them out. So they know when they open it, oh, this is a business letter. Oh, this is just an informal letter. Oh, this is a pen pal letter. So we have parts of a persuasive letter that are written here, because now you want to send the letter. We've written it. We've decided what the parts of the letter are going to be, how we're going to write it, what the headers are, what the data is inside of it. And now we also now have a formal structure on an envelope. More data, more structures, and more how to read it. Because if you want the postman to deliver this to somebody, the recipient's name needs to go in a certain spot. The address, state zip codes, and the return address back to you or to some place, so that if the recipient has moved or is no longer there, where does it go back to? So we have business requirements wrapped up in here. We have data structures backed up in here. We have all this cool information going on, and it's all about having the proper formats, the protocols in place. So once you have your letter and it's addressed, you have your recipient's name. Now you can go to the post office, or you can walk out to your front yard and put it in your mailbox if you have one, or the centralized mailbox. So you can think of mailbox as a IP address of where it's going to, and the address in a actual mail's case is the recipient's name. If you were doing an email, we're more talking about a resolution to a domain for an IP address, where a system on the other end can read in the headers on the email and know where that email is supposed to go to and who to forward it to. So somebody, aka the postal person, will come, pick up your letter, which is now the computer network, and they're going to take it to the place that it belongs to. Well, we've already talked about formats, the protocols. So the format is the name on the outside of the address, where it's going to, where it's coming from, that you have the proper stamps in place, and it's been reviewed. So think of the stamp as, yes, we're good here. I'll put a stamp on it to send it and to pay for the services. You have your post office box of where it's coming from and where it's going to IP addresses, the domains, and then eventually the person that it goes to, recipient's name and address, recipient's name and IP address. And then once you put it in the post office, the post person picks it up to deliver it to the person at the other end. So you have your email client, or your envelope here with your body in your email for what the information is you're sending with your own headers and footers. Instead of a person here delivering the mail and to the recipient, you now have a computer network that's doing it. So we have our data and our formats and protocols in place for how we're going to get that letter from one mailbox to somebody else's mailbox somewhere. So the networking piece of this. So now that we can see how we go from writing a letter that has standards, bodies, and structures, the different types of the header. Maybe you want to store it in a database, so you can literally go down and make columns in a database and rows to fill up the data for all the mails that are sent. Then you can save them that way. You know how to write them down to somewhere and read them back in. In this case, we're going for an email client. There are protocols in place, and there are required values for when you are sending and or receiving emails. You can go out to that website there, the data tracker. For the people who wrote up that format, the Internet Engineering Task Force. And there's a document out there you can go read. Explains a bunch of stuff. Lots of technical things if you really want to go on deep. So I wanted to get you something there if you want to say, what is this? Well, here's the protocols and here's some things in place. Then the email is sent over the network to one, maybe multiple email servers. Even if you're sending it to a person who's maybe an office or two down, it's still going to go out to an email server. It might bounce around to a couple of places and then finally come back to the client, even though they're a couple of doors down. So that may or may not happen, but it definitely goes out to the servers somewhere. If it's unencrypted, any servers that go between can be read. People have things to look at, emails that go through, they'll be able to see them. If it's encrypted, they're going to need your certificate and stuff to actually open it up and read it. The odds of that are slim. It can happen. I'm not saying it won't. But once that email is set into place, you have your to, your from, your subject header, the required values. So the email knows where to go, and you hit that send button on your computer. It travels across the network, and then wham! The person on the other end can open it up and read what you've sent them. So there are other protocols in place. There's a couple of websites for you to go further in depth on them. There are networking protocols for each different layers of how things are sent. You go from the computer's physical layers, the network's link layers, to some form of transport layers, all the way up to application layer, HTML, web browser, Chrome, all of those things. So there's different layers and levels. You can go read to your heart's content about that. I just wanted to get here and that 100,000 foot view of data, how it's formatted, how you could store it in a database, or how you could store it just as a flat file. You need that format to write things out and read things in as, and some sort of protocols when you're sending data between one place and another, so you know how to get the information where it needs to go. Connecting to a database, connecting to a file system. There's protocols for each one of those that you can look up. So I hope that I have helped you learn a little bit today at our 100,000 foot view of data and networking. Please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Have a nice day. Goodbye, world!